Georgiou Kata from Christian Democratic Movement. My question will be about your approach to the EU and the crisis of euro in the EU. As far as I know, you have not slightly, but quite a different approach about the future of the EU, and as one of your leaders mentioned, I think it was a couple of months ago, he said that they see European Union not as a union of nations, but a union of nation states. Right? Where the UK Conservative government is taking the EU, and what shape you believe it will take in the next 5-10 years? And of course, indeed, it will be large. Georgia-EU relationship is growing, and I'm sure that the future of the EU will largely affect the future of Georgia.
How long have you got? Yes, we do have a different view on how Europe should develop. We've always taken the view that the European Union was a collection of nation states that should cooperate on the basis of nation states and not attempt to become a single, united political entity. The United Kingdom entered what was then the common market on the basis of collective trade and economic opportunity. And there is a school of thought in the United Kingdom that there is a historic suspicion of the European Union because it's a collection of foreign nations that might not share the same views as the United Kingdom. I take a different view. The problem for the United Kingdom is not that the European Union is foreign, if you like, it's that it's not foreign enough in the global economy. It focuses too much on Europe, it focuses too much on the European Union, on its political structures, on its internal problems. And the real threat is that you have policymakers in the European Union who have maps on their wall with the Greenwich Meridian in the middle, whereas policymakers in the United States or in East Asia have maps of the world with the international date line in the middle. And that is far closer to the political and economic reality that we face today. And so I think that there is a tendency for European politicians to focus on what was a very impressive single market in years gone by, but looks less impressive compared to the mass markets in India or China or elsewhere. And I think that what we need to try to do now is to get the European Union to focus on its competitiveness in a global context, to look to see within the European Union what barriers may exist in legislation that make it less competitive, and to tackle those. But the answer to the problems of Europe do not lie in closer integration, more law, or more regulation. Now, as for the single currency, we are not a member of the single currency, thanks to the last Conservative Prime Minister, John Major, who kept Britain out of the treaty, and how wise he looks in retrospect. The European single currency was entered upon, as Jacques Delors himself has now recognised, with countries being allowed to join who never economically met the convergence criteria, and then exacerbated by the fact that they were allowed to follow fiscal policies which put them on a divergent course rather than a convergent course with those criteria. And then we wonder why we get into the position where countries like Portugal or Ireland or Greece have huge amounts of debts and an economy that's inappropriate for the European Central Bank's basic fiscal policies. Why is anybody surprised by this? It was being predicted for many years by those who were sceptical about the project. It gives me no joy to say that we were right in our analysis. But Europe, like most of the Western world, needs to recognise that you cannot borrow forever. You cannot live on someone else's money, and a return to the concept of sound money and living within your means will be a prerequisite to putting Europe's fiscal and financial house in order. And it is not going to be a short-term process. This is not a 2-year cyclical correction. This is a 10-year structural correction. And I hope that by the end of it, we will have recognised that we cannot simply mortgage the future of subsequent generations so that we can continue to spend more money than we actually have.
Dr. My name is David Leon, President of the American Chamber of Commerce. As you can probably guess by accent, I'm actually British. You mentioned earlier on in your speech that it was very important, particularly today, for the media to be free. And you made a comment about the centralisation of ownership. This is clearly something that's on your mind. What should the government be doing to ensure that there is a much wider range of opinions and a wider distribution of opinions within the country? You mentioned the internet, but I think TV at the moment is by far the dominant force. Maybe you could just comment a bit more detail on that, please.
Well, I simply point to examples that exist internationally. It is tempting for those who want to control opinion to want to control the sources of dissemination of information. That has always been true. But I think it is wise to seek as wide a range of ownership in the media as possible. A pluralistic media, I think, is a real benefit to a healthy and vibrant political system. I think that those who believe that they can own media to such an extent that they will become the only source of information, however, are likely to be disappointed. Because just as the medieval church discovered that it was being confronted by the printing press and the dissemination of information which caused it to lose its grip on how information was presented, so it is happening to political authorities today. And in all the talk about the events in the world post 9/11 and how things have changed, I think that the most fundamental thing that has changed has been the ability of people to be able to get access to information, whether or not their political leaders want them to do so. And that genie, now that it's out of the bottle, will never be put back. And it is something that the political class will have to learn to come to terms with and to deal with, whether they like it or not, and mostly it's going to be not. But it's a means by which we can guarantee as best we can that ordinary citizens will be able to get access to information over the heads, in some cases, of leaderships who will want to prevent them from doing so. I wouldn't comment on the internal dynamic here, but I would say that the general point holds that the wider the free expression of political opinion, the healthier the democracy is likely to be. And the health of a democracy is not measured by how much the political leadership enjoy it. It's measured by how much the citizens are able to change it.
I have two questions. The first one is, have you some idea what will happen in Chicago during the summit of NATO? And the second question is that, you know, we have a neighbor which is a problem-making neighbor, you know about him. And I think that the Western community is always trying to reward this neighbor somehow for any behavior. Suppose they have received the Olympic Games in Sochi, which is a personal project of the former President Putin. They have stolen, I think by bribery, the football championate, which now will be also in this country. It's very interesting that the West is over there set the big reward for the Moscow propaganda, the reset strategy of Washington. Will it change sometime, this policy? It's my question.